Get started today and go a little bit off script from the agenda. I wanted to take a minute as we are the Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee to invite Arthur Gonzalez to stand up and to share a little bit about his story and what's brought him here today to spend the day with me. And so, Arthur, just give us your name, a little bit about your story, and some thoughts you have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, community, for allowing me to speak. My name is Arthur Gonzalez, and I am a convicted felon. I got in trouble back in 2014. I went to prison for 8.5 years, and I can tell you that prison was the best thing that happened to me in my life. It allowed me to determine who I really wanted to be and what kind of example I wanted to be for my kids. With the help and investment that you guys have gave to the prison systems, it allowed me to get my GED. It allowed me to get proper programming, and it also helped me on my journey outside of prison. I've been out of prison for 1.5 years now. I go to Donnelly College. I got a Henry Block scholarship. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree in business with the chance to go to Donnelly to get my AA, transfer to UMKC to get my BS, and then also get my master's from UMKC. Through the grants and the investments that you guys have with the programs has allowed me to succeed. And I'm grateful for the help that you guys have given me. I have faced some challenges. I am a non-traditional student. I'm a first-generational student, so I have to work 10 times harder to get a job, to find housing, which I do have my own place. I do have my own vehicle, and I work full-time. I maintain a 3.9 GPA in school, and I'm here to tell you guys how grateful I am for all that you guys are doing, for all the opportunities that you invest in with inside the prison system, because I do understand that KDOC has to run on a budget, but having programs like BIB, T4C, reaching out from within gives us a chance to reintegrate into society, gives us a chance to know that people do believe in us. So when you guys do believe in us, it gives us hope. The obstacles for, outside of prison is trying to find a job. I have applied at 10 jobs, 7 required no background checks, 3 of them did. Out of the 10 jobs that I applied for, 6 of them turned me down because they ended up getting my criminal background check back, but they didn't ask for it on the application. Housing, depending on where I get approved for, are in communities that would allow me to go back to prison. So finding good housing and decent jobs is a struggle. I have overcome those obstacles to work overnights, 12-hour nights at a warehouse, 4 days a week, and take 15 credit hours every semester, and I am on my 3rd semester in college. And I'm grateful that, I'm able to get FAFSA, to get the comprehension grant, to be able to get Pell Grants and student loans to be able to succeed. It is good to have you guys be able to believe in us. And I'm here to thank you guys so you guys can see that the people who come behind me know that even though we've been locked up, that there are people that want to help us, that people do believe in us. And I wanted to show you guys by me being here that your investments aren't going unheeded, that there are guys that are wanting to learn, there are guys that are wanting to succeed. Sometimes we need to go to prison and get our lives in check, and sometimes doing that gives us the push that we need. And for me to be here, I feel honored that I can share my story with you and that you can see that success can happen. Sometimes my path in life went different than yours, but I am here and I am grateful to have that second chance, to be able to have those programs inside the prison systems to get me where I am. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Arthur. I met Arthur when he came up with a group of students with the Kansas Independent College Association. And when I had just a few minutes to meet with him, you talk about an inspiration. And that's part of why I invited him to come spend the day with me and see what we do and share a little bit about his story, because it goes to show that the things that we do in this committee room and in this building have significant impact on people, even if we don't actually get to see it or feel it. And so really great to have him here. Anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask Arthur? All right, I only have one question, and that is, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to college for?
I'm going to college to get
So where's that going to lead you? Oh, man. All right, well, keep hanging out with me then, would you? All right, well, thank you very much, Arthur. I really appreciate it. Okay, we'll now move into approval of the meeting minutes. They were sent out for February 19th and then March 5th, 6th, and 7th. Committee, do I have a motion as it relates to those meeting minutes? Representative Eric Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approval of the minutes for those times.
Very good. Do I have a second? All right, committee, any discussion on that? All right, seeing none. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, those meeting minutes are approved. We will now move into a hearing on Senate Bill 491 and ask Natalie to read every single page of that bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 491 standardizes criminal history record check fingerprinting language, and it also defines who may be fingerprinted for criminal history record check. As much as I know that you guys would like me to go section by section through the whole bill, I'm just going to hit on kind of the highlights. Essentially, the bill creates a few new sections to transfer most of the standardized fingerprinting language into those new sections. And then the rest of the bill is just conforming amendments in the statutes that currently authorize fingerprinting. So new section 1 puts fingerprinting requirements in place for criminal justice agencies. Those agencies are required to have applicants for criminal justice employment be fingerprinted, and those fingerprints are submitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for a search of the state and federal database. Fingerprints provided pursuant to this section may be used to identify a person and to determine whether that person has a record of criminal history in this state or in any other jurisdiction. The KBI shall release criminal history record information related to adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, adult expunged records, juvenile adjudications, juvenile non-adjudications, and juvenile diversions. And these go to a city clerk when they're running background on a chief of police, a county election officer for candidates for sheriff, the governor for an appointment to the position of the Kansas Highway Patrol Superintendent, and a state, county, city, university, railroad, tribal, Horace-Feath Reservoir Benefit District, or school law enforcement agency for admitting applicants for certification to the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. The Bureau then certifies any adult conviction record information that is found of a chief of police or candidate for sheriff to the Kansas Attorney General. Fingerprints and criminal history record information received will be confidential and not subject to the Open Records Act. And disclosure of any of that information for purposes other than what's described is a Class A non-person misdemeanor and would constitute grounds for removal from office. Section 2 relates to governmental agencies that are not criminal justice agencies. So those identified may require a person to be fingerprinted and to, again, have those fingerprints submitted to the FBI for a search of both the state and federal database. They can be used, that information can be used to identify that person and determine whether they have a criminal history record in this state or another state. And so in this section, the subsections are divided by the types of information that the body is able to receive related to those fingerprints. So the KBI will release criminal history record information for adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, adult expunged records, juvenile adjudications, juvenile non-adjudications, juvenile diversions, and juvenile expunged records to DCF or KDADs for participation in a program administered for the placement, safety, protection, or treatment of vulnerable children or adults. The KBI will release information related to adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, adult expunged records, and juvenile expunged records to the state lottery for candidates for employment and to the Racing and Gaming Commission for candidates for employment or licensure. The KBI will release information about adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, adult expunged records, juvenile adjudications, juvenile non-adjudications, and juvenile diversions to the EMS board for applicants for an emergency medical services provider certificate, the Attorney General for applicants for a license to carry a concealed handgun, the Department of Administration for candidates for sensitive employment with unescorted physical access to state-operated or contract data centers, telecommunications facilities, or other security-sensitive areas. The KBI will release adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, and adult expunged records to the Supreme Court and the State Board of Law Examiners for applicants to practice law, the State Gaming Agency for candidates for employment or licensure, the Attorney General for private detective applicants, the Attorney General for certification to train private detectives in the handling of firearms and the lawful use of force, and the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training for applicants for certification under the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act. The KBI will release information related to adult convictions, adult non-convictions, adult diversions, and juvenile adjudications to the Athletic Commission for candidates for boxing commissioner and the Secretary of Health and Environment for employees at a child care facility. The KBI will release adult convictions and juvenile adjudications to the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services for applicants for employment at an adult care home, to KDADS for applicants for employment as a disability services provider, and to KDADS again for applicants for employment with a home health agency. And the KBI will release information related to adult convictions and non-convictions to the Division of Motor Vehicles for applicants for a CDL, the Board of Examiners in Optometry for applicants for an optometry license, the Board of Pharmacy for persons seeking license registration or a permit or certificate issued by the Board of Pharmacy, the State Board of Healing Arts for applicants for any license, registration, permit, or certificate issued by the board, the State Board of Healing Arts for applicants to be a physical therapist or physical therapy assistant, the Board of Nursing for applicants for licensure as a professional nurse, practical nurse, or mental health technician, the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board for applicants for a license, registration, permit, or certificate issued by the board, the State Lottery for a vendor to whom a major procurement contract is to be awarded, the Attorney General for appointees of the governor to positions subject to confirmation by the Senate and judicial appointees, appointing authorities for non-gubernatorial appointees, the Kansas Real Estate Commission for applicants for a license to act as a broker or salesperson, the Insurance Commissioner for applicants for licensure as an insurance agent, the Insurance Commissioner for applicants for a public adjuster license. And then the KBI will release criminal history record information about adult convictions to the Department of Agriculture for hemp employees, the Department of Agriculture for applicants for licensure as a hemp producer, the Office of the State Fire Marshal for applicants for registration as a hemp processor, the Department of Agriculture for hemp destruction employees, the Bank Commissioner for a license issued by the Commissioner, and applicants for licensure under the state, or the Kansas Money Transmitter Act, the Bank Commissioner for an applicant for employment as a new executive officer or director with a money transmitter company, the Bank Commissioner for a proposed officer, director, or shareholder of a trust company related to a change of control application, the Bank Commissioner for applicants for a license to engage in mortgage business or registration to conduct mortgage business as a loan originator, the State Banking Board for any officer, director, or organizer of a proposed fiduciary financial institution, municipalities for applicants for merchant or security police, the Bank Commissioner for members of a co-partnership or association and certain officers or directors of that co-partnership under the Uniform Consumer Credit Code, the State Department of Credit Unions for candidates for employment, the Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control for non-resident applicants, the Division of Post Audit for certain employees or contractors of the division, the Bank Commissioner for applicants for licensure under the Kansas Credit Services Organization Act, the Real Estate Appraisal Board for licensure under the Certified and Licensed Real Property Appraisers Act, the Real Estate Appraiser Board for applicants for licensure under the Appraisal Management Company Registration Act, the Department of Health and Environment for employees in the Office of Vital Statistics, the Kansas Commission on Veterans Affairs Office for candidates for certain types of employment, the members of the Senate Standing Committee for appointees to the Public Employees Retirement Systems Board of Trustees, the Attorney General for applicants for licensure as a bail enforcement agent, the Department of Revenue for employees and contractors with access to federal tax information, the Division of Motor Vehicles for employees authorized to manufacture, produce, or issue driver's license and ID cards, the Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing for the executive director, the Kansas Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing for communication access service providers, KDHE for employees in the Office of Laboratory Services, the head of an executive branch agency for employees and contractors who have access to personal information. And then there is a requirement in this section for state and local law enforcement agencies to assist with taking fingerprints of those individuals. And any body is required to recess into a closed or executive session to receive that criminal history information. The KBI can charge a reasonable fee for conducting that criminal history record check, and fingerprints received again shall be confidential and not subject to KORA. And disclosure, other than for the purposes described, would be a Class A non-person misdemeanor, and would constitute grounds for removal from office. And then the last new section here, new section 3, provides for name-based criminal history record checks for certain individuals. So these aren't fingerprint checks, but they're checks of just based on the person's name. And the KBI is going to release criminal history information related to adult convictions and non-convictions to the State Board of Healing Arts for licensure by the board, and the state lottery for the purposes of awarding major contracts. And then information just related to adult convictions to KDADS for applicants for an adult care home operator license, the Joint Committee on Kansas Security for committee staff of the Office of Reviser of Statutes and KLRD, the Attorney General for applicants for roofing contractor registration, KDHE for applicants for a permit to construct, alter, or operate a solid waste processing facility, KDADS for applicants for licensure as an adult care home administrator, the Board of Nursing for applicants for a nurse license, the state lottery for applicants for employment at the lottery, the governor and the Senate for appointees as the executive director of the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, the Racing and Gaming Commission for employees who are animal health officers, and the governor and the Senate for appointees as executive director of the state gaming agency. Again, for these name-based record checks, the KBI can charge a reasonable fee, and the criminal history record information received will be confidential and not subject to open records. The remaining sections, 4 through 103, amend statutes that authorize fingerprinting and criminal history record check information throughout the statutes. And essentially, those amendments just remove language that's found in new sections 1 through 3 to standardize that language throughout the statutes. I would note the Senate Committee on Judiciary did make just a couple amendments, mostly technical, but I'll go over them. So most of them moved agencies from receiving certain types of information to another section. Most of those, almost all of them, in fact, were based on drafting errors when the draft was first introduced. So their statute authorized them to either receive more or less information than what they were receiving under the new section. And so those were just moved to conform with what they're getting under current law. There were a few amendments just to address consistency in verbiage used throughout, essentially making some things plural, some things singular. And then finally, there's language to pass the cost on to people being fingerprinted in a couple of the insurance commission statutes. That was stricken inadvertently when it was drafted. It's very common for agencies to have the ability to pass those costs on. And so that shouldn't have been stricken in the underlying bill. And I can take any questions.
All right, committee, any questions? Representative Carmichael.
Mr. Chair, you'll be glad to know that last night I thought, I might get through the entire week without asking any questions, but I just couldn't help myself, Mr. Chair. Insofar as who or what agency is able to access these criminal justice records, does the bill make substantive changes as compared with current law?
There's, I believe, and I'm going to let the KBI address this because I think after the Senate amendments, there technically is maybe 1 or 2 changes in what an agency would receive under current law versus in this new bill. But Other than that, no. The primary purpose was just to standardize the language, not to change the authority of what each agency receives.
Mr. Stewart looks very comfortable and competent, so I'm sure he will be able to describe those to us without receiving even so much as a clue. I also, though, did note that there are some provisions regarding Cora and receipt of this information in executive session by various agencies, et cetera. Is that a new provision, or is it a provision that has been in some statutes and not in others? And does it apply to all agencies receiving these records? A compound question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe, and again, I'll let the KBI speak for themselves, but I believe that's one of the areas as to why they're wanting to standardize this, because it is language that shows up in some of the fingerprinting statutes, but not all of them. And so because of the strict penalties about non-disclosure and wanting to make sure only the authorized people are accessing the information that is received about those criminal histories, that's, the purpose for the requirement to make them go into closed executive session.
And Mr. Chairman, that's an area of particular interest to me. I was fingerprinted twice on the same day, and one agency maintained all of the information in complete confidence, and the other information discussed it in a public agency, discussed it in a public hearing. So we're making good progress. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you weren't behind bars when that happened.
Once was at the Sheriff's Training Center, once was at the county jail, and I'll reveal no further facts. Thank you.
Got it. Very good, committee. Any other questions for Natalie? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Natalie. All right, for proponent testimony, we will start off with Robert Stewart, Executive Officer of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Robert, thanks for being here.
Chairman Owens, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today and allowing me to act as a witness to the proponent testimony that we have today. My name is Bob Stewart. I'm the Executive Officer for the KBI. I would be a jerk if I did not start off by publicly thanking Natalie Scott for her yeoman's work over the last 2 years with this 211-page presentation to you today. Not only did she have the hard work of putting all this together, she had the additional handicap of dealing with 2 newbies at this whole process, myself and Nicole Maddox, who is our subject matter expert. To Representative Carmichael's point, I feel comfortable only because I have her support and Nicole's support. Otherwise, I would be frightened. I also will not attempt to read all 211 pages. I will point out the why, and sort of leave it at that. What we have observed over the last couple years is our friends at the FBI have got new legislation in their pocket that they have to deal with federally that requires them to take a harder look at their data sets and how they share them. So the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, data pools that they have are what we access when we do both criminal justice background and criminal justice backgrounds for civil purposes. Now, as you heard Natalie mention and recite, at our count, there are 77 different statutory authorities in the state of Kansas, 4 of which fit all the criminal side, and 73 of which cover all those civil agencies that we talked about, or that she mentioned. All that's reflected here. We needed to put it in one spot because the FBI has sort of taken a variable look at what their requirements are. And we have several agencies in the state of Kansas who are not getting the data that you have asked that they get. What they'll get if they do these fingerprint checks is the KBI has access to Kansas data. We will provide the Kansas level data. But when we ask the FBI for the remainder of the states and the federal data, we don't get it. Now that's problematic, for example, if this agency has somebody that you all have decided needs a background before they can get a certification or a certain job, they're only getting Kansas data. They may not see criminal convictions in the state of Missouri or Utah or any place else that would matter to the decision makers in determining whether or not this person should have a nurse's license, or this person should be allowed to work with children, or one of the myriad different responsibilities that fall under those 77 different statutory authorities. So because the FBI has started to do this, and they've sort of warned us over the last couple of years, they're going to be harsher and harsher about their read of their own statutory responsibilities. We knew that we had to come before you and fix that. Because those statutes, those 77 different places, the language, as you can understand better than most, doesn't comport with each other. It sits out. Some language says this, some language says that, and we needed to put it in one place with conforming language so that we were comfortable that the FBI would most likely approve all those, and if for some reason they did not, it would be one easy fix rather than trying to find it in different spots, rather than have, I know some of our agencies have been frustrated over the last couple of years because the FBI has not been very forthcoming about why they won't approve it. So we're trying to get it all in conforming language in one spot. To answer the question that was posed, we don't believe that there may be one substantive change. All the rest of these changes in this 211 pages really is conforming the language and conforming the authority to what we believe the FBI will approve. This does not grant any new authorities other than one situation. The EMS folks made a request to broaden their authority a little bit, and that was the only one that has been changed to my knowledge. All the rest of the amendments that we approve or we agree with were technical in nature and fixes that, the drafting wasn't quite right that we needed to adjust. Other than that, this does not grant any new authority at all. It just moves the authority to one easier place, I should say, so that we can hopefully make sure the agencies that you all have determined were important to get the information, gets the information from the FBI, that they don't cause too much trouble in giving us that information. And if there is an adjustment in the way they view their law, that we can respond relatively quickly. My written testimony tries to lay that out much like the revisor did in terms of bracketing the different pieces, the different requirements, and that kind of does a good job of showing you how diverse some of these piles are. Well, this agency gets this, this, and this, but not this. This agency gets not that, but this, this, and this. So it's just a hodgepodge of those different data sets that has caused us frustration, the agency's frustration, and the FBI frustration that we're trying to deal with. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Question for you. So are you in support of the changes that were made in the Senate committee, the Senate amendments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that for our knowledge. Committee questions? Nope. Representative Schlancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Stewart. What is the nature of the EMS broadening of?
I don't know. I will look at Nicole and
Because you mentioned it, I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, he's going to be our next proponent.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I didn't get the email. For some reason, my computer isn't working, so I'm flying blind here. So.
Not a problem.
the real subject matter expert.
There you go. Further questions, committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
We will now move on to Joseph House, Executive Director of the Emergency Medical Services Board. Welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Joe House, I'm the Executive Director of the Emergency Medical Services Board, and as alluded to, we are one of the ones that did change to a more broad receipt of records. So initially, the first draft of Senate Bill 491 actually had us in the wrong section. We were receiving information off adult convictions, non-convictions, and adjudications, and the adjudications portion was dropped off of the original drafting. So our request was of the Senate committee to either move us to subsection B5, which was the closest to what we were currently receiving, or to consider adding us into B3, which is the adult convictions, non-convictions, diversions, and expunged records, as well as juvenile adjudications, non-adjudications, and diversions. Our reasoning behind that was that, one, very high degree of trust to EMS providers. We very rarely, if ever, get checked when we're going into buildings because there's an emergency occurring. They're okay with us showing up in lights and sirens in an ambulance and going in and rendering care. Second part of that is we have unrestricted access to people. In most situations, or in some situations, quite vulnerable in nature. They may be kids without a parent present, minors and such, and so it warrants a very high degree of trust of our providers, and we feel as though having all of this information allows us to make the best licensing decision possible on ensuring that those folks do warrant that high degree of trust. On the juvenile side of things, we do actually license individuals under the age of 18. And so having that ability to be able to look at those juvenile records is quite important as well moving forward. So that's our reasoning behind asking for that broadening side of things. The Senate did agree with that stance, put us into subsection B3 to fix the original error and such. But one error out of that 211-page bill, Natalie and the KBI did a phenomenal job of getting it to there. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have related to this, but we stand in strong support.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. House, I believe it is. Are arrests and non-convictions and expungements disqualifying for licensure under the board, or is this supplemental information for the employer?
Great question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is all supplemental information. There are no absolute bars or disqualifications.
I understand. Thank you.
Very good. Additional questions, committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Committee, there's also written-only proponent testimony from Alexandra Blasey on behalf of the Kansas Board of Pharmacy. Blasey, my apologies. I don't see any neutral or opponent testimony. And so with that in mind, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on SB 491. If you guys would plan on adding this to your list of bills that we could work tomorrow or Thursday, just for your knowledge, in case you know, anybody wants to move the Board of EMS back to some other subsection that, you know, just in case. Anyway, with I've got Vice Chairman Smith thinking about it. Watch out. All right, committee. Well, thank you guys very much. We'll be adjourned for the day. Thank you.